Right. I'm gonna try to pull this one on them.
Oh. All you friends on cable, I hate to keep burdening you with this, but it was late. Well, it was early this morning. I couldn't sleep, and I awoken, and the voice of the Lord spoke to me again. Now, he didn't tell me that he was going to kill me this time. I know we've been through that. I know we've been through that, and you people did the best you could. This time it's worse. He says that if we cannot raise through your kind generosity, at least, what was it last time? At least, $6,000 to help carry on our good work, that this time he is going to send over to my apartment at least 5 television evangelists who think they're going to die, and he's going to make them stay with me until I get the money. So you can see the quandary in which I am. Which, don't come looking. That's not the name of the apartment, so don't try to come find it. Now we're going to try, as we have been doing, for me to make some comment. They've selected me tonight, and people have requested certain of the Kyroots are read tonight. And what's remaining of our show, I'll try and make some additional comment. One I'd like to do, it got kind of miswritten. It's not the reader's fault. In case we don't get to it, but I wanted to reread it. Was the last one. It was a part of a folklore that Kyroots parenthetically said might be rebel or otherwise. And what it said was, what does it say? Oh, one guy kept all the best parts for himself, saved all the best parts for himself. And he later said, well, what other benefit is there in being yourself? We all remember that great Kyroot that all problems are caused by somebody trying to help. After that, send over the evangelist. I don't care. I know how to take care of them. Put on a little Sonic Youth or Ice Cube, and they'll be out there in a minute. Then Kyroot said, start off with the early ones since they're the first ones on the list, because somebody had the wherewithal to put them in numerical sequence, them being numbers and all. So we're starting here at number 2. It's the first one checked. Then Kyroots said, while waiting on a bus and attempting to spend some quality reflecting time with himself, one man mused. Men won't. They do want to be led, or else wolves would not hold parliamentary elections. That, I think, a man later tonight in the Kyroots who pointed out that at times, as bad as he felt about not understanding most of what was being said, that he felt even worse when it became obvious that metaphors are being jumbled up intentionally. And that made him even understand what was going on more or lesser than he normally did, although he did apologize for the fractured syntax. There it is. What? That. Page 2. Amongst yourselves, I guess somebody out there in the audience can say, well, what's the point? Wolves do not hold elections. You know, you can pull a bunch of stuff on cable TV, I guess, or any TV. You can make people buy Vegematics. You can make people send in money for some kind of self-improvement course. But there is a limit to the kind of folly over which you can put on people. Having nothing to do with whims or quandaries. And Kyroots said, one guy had some plans, but however they did not seem to include himself. As I'm sure you're aware by now, it seemed like the early ones, unless there's an exception, seem to just go right along. And Kyroots said, all plans contain a flaw, but not the sweat bullets kind Brutus. If it were possible to have a plan without a flaw, you wouldn't need plans to begin with. Does that wrap up the secondary world or not? Does that cover, if anybody requested it, let me see if I can find it. In conjunction to one not requested a few pages back was And Kyroots said everyone has the same set of secondary parents, a couple of two-eyed, incestuous cannibals with a penchant for plagiarism. Other than that being some sort of attack, that shows the health of the secondary world. That shows the vibrancy of history, that we shall all press on, go forward, excelsior. If it were possible to have a plan without a flaw, you wouldn't need plans to begin with. What could you look at as being another description of all intellectual, secondary progress of man? The arts, science, literature, fashion. It is, in a sense, a search for a plan sans flaws. You could look at all attempted religions. You could look at all, especially the Reformed, once the religion becomes incestuous and once enough people get complacent and become beige enough that they begin to merge into the woodwork there of the temple or the church, then of course you have a schism and you have somebody that's going to be a reformed fraction of the religion. But it is always a form of incest, and it is always the continuing attempt to refine the plan. Once you've had a plan that's been in operation, no matter what it is, art, music, fashion, science, once the plan has been around long enough that it's prepared to get creaky, that it is beginning to get long in the tooth, if it is not going to die, which many times they do, they become history, but if they are not to simply be dead and buried, then they have to revise the plan. And it's always on the basis that originally all plans start out as a search for a flawless plan. And if it's not going to die, then somewhere along the line, people here and there, a Luther, and I don't mean the guy that with Two Live Crew out of Miami, I was thinking more of Martin, but somebody says, well, the plan wasn't bad, but it has a what? A flaw. And so they continue to try and refine it. Kyroots started out just being direct, by saying all plans contain a flaw. Ordinary minds, if they had nothing better to do, could hold it up right there and say that's not true. And even they would naysay themselves without knowing it, because if we wanted to play along with such a game with the ordinary aspect of your mind, or with somebody else's mind, if you got to pretend that life exists outside of your own brain, and you said, all plans contain a flaw, and it has a dash there, and the other person says, hold it, point of order. To begin with, the first part of this is untrue. All plans do not contain a flaw. And if you said, well, I could be wrong. I mean, I was wrong once before my life. Once I thought I was wrong, and I was wrong. And you say, well, correct me. And the person, tell me an example. What is a plan without a flaw? And so let us say if they were fairly ordinary, in no pejorative sense, but let us say that most likely they would pick out their religion. And they'd say, well, God's plan, Allah's plan, the entire system of life known as Islam, or Judaism, or Christianity. And then let us say that you were playing along for whatever reason. You went, well, now are you going to make me point out the obvious, that there's some flaws in that plan, that you've had some popes that wore women's underwear, spit in the street? There have been things in your religion that simply do not measure up to your own self-proclaimed standards. And they say, well, sure, I'm not an idiot. So you see, they would be admitting that there's no such thing as a plan without a flaw, except they can't see it that way. And of course, you would not be within your even sane wits. You'd be out sucking on your own tailpipe if you tried to get in such a conversation with a person. But you do see that they would deny it if you said, all plans contain a flaw. Humanity, as it should, would say, no. And if you said, well, what? And most likely they'd say religion. Or they might try to press it nowadays, and somebody might say, well, the scientific attitude. Will we call that a plan? If I said, okay, we'll call that a plan. And then you say, but you mean that plan is without flaw, And let's assume that they were that intelligent and you went, let me, and they'd go, well, wait a minute. And they would start coming out with some of the faux pas, some of the missteps made in the name of science. And they say, well, you're right. Now, there have been this and that. But do you see, the point is, as always, they have got to be able to take it, both possibilities, and not see that there is any problem with tossing the coin, and no matter how it comes up, they go, well, yeah, I'm in favor of that. It's true right this second. That is, they understand that, all right, there is a flaw to the plan, but that's not the point. And you can't tell them otherwise. You can't tell yourself. You can't tell part of your brain if it goes, well, 2 and 2 is 4. And you go, well, sometimes it's not. And they go, well, yeah, sure, sometimes it's not. And if you try to go, well, nothing. It starts out, all plans contain a flaw. But if it were possible to have a plan without a flaw, you wouldn't need a plan to begin with. With no further ado, we'll just turn the page and go on. And Kyroots gave some internal punctuation for the neurally rebellious. Whenever you pluralize a process, you turn it into something else, wittingly or not. And civilians should stick with nouns. I hate to, but all right. Think about it. If you pluralize a process, and just consider process anything that is not an object, if we're not talking about people, if we're not talking about just literally what the mind, in the English language, grammatically speaking, would identify without any question as being an object, a person, a thing, a noun. Anything other than that, a process, a verb, but a process. Once you pluralize it, did you see that there is this, and then you take it in a plural sense? You come up with another version of it. Once you do that, you have turned the process into something else. I'm not saying it's wrong, but you've turned it into something else. That is what happens every time they make plans at the secondary level and call it, for instance, a religion or the scientific method, which is a process. It's not a thing, although you could turn it into a noun in a sentence. But once they take the one process, a religion, a scientific approach, a systematic attempt, or an attempt to think in some sort of systematic way, and you've got this one process, it can't stay there. It has to be incestuous. You have to multiply it. And as soon as you turn it into a plural, it is no longer what it was. Not either good or bad, but it's no longer what it was, and it cannot be defended. Not in the sense that it was originally, and therefore everyone has to defend it. Sometimes 2,000 or 3,000 years that they still have to defend. No, this doesn't have a flaw, because here is what it should have been. And although you can't do it and it's useless, if you could back up, whatever you want to pick on, the Stoic school of philosophy, Catholicism, any religion, anything you wanted to pick on, and all this being meaningless, whatever flaw you found in it, which you and everybody else could find flaws in, including the people in it, if you went back far enough before it was pluralized, when it was one thing, then the flaws you find now wouldn't be there. Of course, it'd be stillborn, it'd be dead, but still, if you go back before it was pluralized, before there were more than one attitudes toward it, then it would not have the flaws you see now. But if it didn't have what you would see as the flaws, it would not be alive. You know another Kyroots? Everything that breathes has got shoddy lungs. Everybody's got TB. Nobody's lungs look good. If they did, you couldn't breathe. I didn't mean to make us sick. Wait a minute, I don't have to put up with that. Oh, I was going to heal myself. I knew a guy one time went to get healed. He kept trying. I won't tell you his problem. It's not the kind of thing you don't hear about. But he kept going to these soothsayers and tent preachers trying to get healed. And he never did understand the word. Every time he'd get there and they'd tell him heal, he'd fall down next to the preacher right at his ankle and get ready to walk along with him. Well, it's hard to come up with fundamentalist religion jokes. I mean, I admit you have to stretch a bit. And Kyroots, with a certain nudge, said, more forces bring men together than have any particular plans for them once they get them there. Would anybody like to go back to the ever-popular page 2? Was it page 2? Yes. Where a man mused, men want to be led, or else wolves would not hold parliamentary elections. Isn't it fun to do these dramatics and go back to one and the point being like, now you see. Never go. I still think there's a connection. I don't know how you can count on me, because if we actually knew anything here, we wouldn't be on cable, would we? We'd be on network. Or we'd be coming to your home, knocking on the door on Saturday morning on our bicycles. And if you weren't home, screw the scriptures, we'd raid your house, we'd break in. And in response to a previous Kyroots from last time, if you recall, and if you don't, I assume my pointing will take care of it. It was from last time. This guy explodes, I guess after having enough time to think about it. He said, now wait just a metaphysical minute. If life itself doesn't know exactly what it's doing, what do you expect out of me? Touchy. Jesus. I have to keep reminding everybody, this is just a show. We're just on tape. I mean, this is not actually in real time or real people. Part of us are just computer generated and not too good a job at that. No offense to the people in the control room, but... All right. Progress, 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 said the old sorehead. I'll tell you about human progress. And he commenced to do so. Here's what he said. After 3,000 years, the poetic tongue of man's secondary mind still has little better to do than to track the comings and the goings of the primary world. Oh, and a brief little burst of glorious inspiration, be able to call some of them folly. You may either go look up your college textbooks on poetry for the masses, or go check the more poetic aspects of all great Vadimekums. What do you find? Kyroots been slipping this in for a long time, well, several weeks now, but one of them, there was some brute, an unsubstantiated rumor that was going about that some guy had actually written a song that didn't have any lyrics having anything to do with the primary world. You remember that one? I thought not. Getting there again. This old sorehead, Kyroots used that, since some of you like to slide in through a door when you think that sarcasm, well-founded sarcasm, sort of push the door open so that you could walk in untouched by such questionable attitudes. So at any rate, Kyroots has this old sorehead say, progress, I'll tell you what progress is, the poetic tongue. And it's not, as you people know, regardless of these guys that write, it's not picking on poets exactly, not to exclude them, however, but the kind of things that humans, religious writers, all forms of poetry, go look up poetry. Don't be like that little kid in his diary. Of course, I can't help it. You might be. If you actually read the definition of poetry, you're going to have to tell yourself, wait a minute, I ain't no bloody poet. He points out that after all this time, about the best, that the tongue of man, the poetic tongue, that is a tongue attempting to speak of something, to note something that is beyond the literal, physical, mundane world, some higher aspect, some hidden aspect, some greater aspect, that about the best, after 3,000 years, about the best it can do, it's still tracking, coming in, going out of the primary world. That is, it's still talking about screwing, eating, and dying. But it didn't leave it there. That'd be crude enough for some of you. But on top of that, sometimes in brief, brilliant bursts of inspiration is just, it's hard to explain, but is able to look at some of them and say, how foolish. Good night to all you poets. Good Get out of town. Oh. Write the New Yorker. Don't write me.